What do you think if I tell you that this effect has been made only with 2 colors and 1 painting session? In this video I will show you how to create this fantastic weathering effect for your scale models, and how to achieve good results using enamels and airbrush. Hi everyone, this is not a sponsor and welcome to my hobby channel. In the last episode I covered the airbrush painting of the Panzer Grey color. Also I highlighted and created some shadows for complementing the painting scheme. You should go and check it out after watching this video. So today I will jump directly from the nice and clean base coat to my first weathering stage. This technique consists in a coat of dust and dirt that allows you to get good results in a very short amount of time. So for preparing the materials, this time I will use Umbral enamels for this task. These are my main colors I use for creating dust effects in my models, and I think that this pallid and desaturated sand color is going to be the best option for complementing the dark Panzer Grey tone. For diluting the enamels, I like to use an enamel thinner from the same brand. In this case, I will use Umbral thinner too. When diluting this type of paints, I try to go for a 50% ratio. So with this sand color thinned and prepared in the airbrush, I proceed to airbrush the model. As always, I recommend you to start in the less exposed areas. This will help you to get some practice and get used to the paint flow. For creating this effect, you should apply the paint in the areas where the dust and dirt tend to accumulate in the real tank, or in the closer areas to the running gear. In these first sandy coats, it doesn't matter if the result is not smooth, you will see later why. Just focus yourself in applying the dust color. In some places I airbrush a few coats to achieve a solid paint layer. Here you can see the result applied in this lower hull area. In the main hull the airbrush application will vary depending on the tank parts. This rear area should also receive a good amount of dust paint because it is very exposed to the dust due to the track's movement. When working with the engine deck, you should change your approach. In this area I'm not looking for a very dust weather area. Instead, my main goal here would be to apply some fuel and stain effects, but in this case, because I have to keep the same appearance in all the model, this time I will go for a subtle effect that will balance effectively the overall result. When airbrushing dust color in areas with hatches, I don't apply too much paint in the areas surrounding these pieces. Instead, I focus in applying some color in the space in between. Here, when working in the front area, my main idea is to create a very dusty front armor. The heaviest paint application here is focused in the very front of the vehicle. Concentrating this effect in this front area will create a very realistic effect when finished. Here, with the airbrush, I apply some vertical passes in different places. Also, it would be necessary to overlap a few painted layers for creating a convincing result. Finally, and little by little, I keep painting the piece and adding small traces for this visor port area. Moving to the fenders area, I go here with a different application pattern. And because these parts are detailed with dozens of accessories and tools, I started sketching and applying the paint in a way that I think that will enhance the look of the pieces. In the turret, I focus in creating a general dust coat all around it. In this case, the paint application has to be subtle, making the effect evident but keeping a big part of the Panzer Grey color underneath visible. As with the main hull, and to keep going with my first idea, I increase the amount of paint in the front side of the turret, applying a few coats where necessary. And in the top area I create some more dust passes with the airbrush, trying to create like some kind of a streaking dust effect, but in a very basic approach. So this is the result when all the tank has been airbrushed with this dust color. At the end, and because I have to reach a lot of pieces, this dust color has covered, at least in this first stage, almost a 90% of the model. Right now the basic sketch has been painted, and you can see how each part has a different dust application. And on the other side, the hatches and door areas have received a very subtle application. Also, you should not forget about the wheels. In this case I painted them in the same way as the rest of the tank. Finally, when painting wheels, don't forget to create some paint effect variety. Applying the paint in different ways will help me to create some variation among the wheels. So, when all the sand paint has been applied, it's time to let it dry. Because I've been using an enamel color, I will need a few hours to dry completely. Unlike other type of paints, enamel have an extended drying time. And this is extremely useful for modelers, because this drying time allows us to create some blending and adjustments in the paint effect until we are happy with it. When it's ready, I use some enamel thinner for blending the effect and remove the excess of paint from the surface. In this case, I use the same enamel thinner from Enamel, but for this task, every enamel or oil thinner will work here. Well, now it's time to start blending. First, I like to start with the vertical plates, and to make it is very useful to use some flat brushes. Of course, using brushes of different sizes can make the difference. This technique was developed and taught me by Joaquin Garcia. I leave a link to his website in the description below. For working in horizontal and flat surfaces, I prefer to use rounded brushes this time, and in this case I take a whole bunch of different brushes, using also some old and deteriorated, and the more variety the better. For removing the paint, it's just a matter of using a wet brush and scrubbing carefully the surface. The more pressure you apply, the more paint you will remove. So keeping this in mind, I continue blending the effect. Here, the big sizes of these brushes allows me to work quicker. At the same time, they create extremely nice streaky dust effects on the armor plates. Blending the effect in the horizontal surfaces has to be done in a different way. Now it's better to create some rounded movements and try to make some type of cloudy patterns when blending. Also, the amount of paint you should remove depends on the area where you were working with. In the front area, I keep with my first idea of creating a heavy dust area. Although this spot is the perfect candidate for creating some cool streaking, I try to create some subtle contrast in the surface, removing the paint in different grades for complementing and making the result more interesting. When working in the engine deck area, as I apply the smaller amount of paint, it is better to blend the effect than removing the enamel paint excessively. If not, the result in this area would be much cleaner than the rest of the model. Blending the effect in this way definitely enhances the result, and also makes more evident what hatches were used commonly. In the turret, the dust resulting scheme is widely worked with flat brushes. As the turret is made from a lot of sloping plates, here the work is even easier, because there are a lot of details and vision ports, which make the result more attractive. It is important to blend properly the hatches areas. They should have a nice contrast between dust and a polished metal surface. In the top of the turret, my main goal was to build here a nice streaking effect, making the turret surface more interesting. Finally, just applying the same concepts as before, I complete the dusting work in the rest of the turret. The overall result in the whole model is very good. Now that all the pieces are together, you can see how the dust effect is different in each area, and it gets heavier towards the areas closer to the ground and more exposed to dust. For finishing the dust application and getting an extra push of smoothness, I decided this time to add another technique for blending all the surfaces. So I took my airbrush and some Tamiya colors. In this case, and because it is very similar to the previous sand enamel tone, I take the always useful and super famous Tamiya buff color. My aim here is to blend and make smoother some parts here and there, especially where I didn't feel very happy with the result. Just another way of cleaning the effect. And it is especially here in the lower areas where I wasn't very happy at all. So, just with a few airbrush touches, I got the result I was looking for. Check how the enamel dust coat doesn't get completely covered by the Tamiya paint. Now I prepare the paint for the airbrush by diluting it into a 70% of thinner. The reason for this is that I want to preserve the enamel dust coat underneath. And if I paint it with a thicker Tamiya paint, it will cover the previous result instead of enhancing it. Also, if I use a proper dilution, I will be able to create some semi-transparent layers that will look very cool when finished. In the whole, I use this paint to outline a little bit more the dust effect and for making it more consistent and solid. Using this mix in the edges of the pieces allowed me to get a very interesting and pleasant result for my taste. Also, in the same way as with the lower parts of the hull, I could blend some specific areas where I saw that the effect needed some corrective touches. I tried to change my paint application and creating variation with the buff color. Sometimes I create dust in a cloudy pattern. Also, I can smooth some of the streaking dust of the vertical plates, or as I did here. Finally, I created some more dust effect in the areas where I found that the result was weaker, as happened in the front of the turret. In the rest of the tank turret, I just kept outlining the edges of the main shape and also enhancing the wall beams by reinforcing the dust coat on them. You can see how the effect is now more controlled, and I think that this way of balancing the overall result is very useful. So this is the final result. The Panzer IV has turned out only in one painting session, from a clean and smooth Panzer grey tone into a heavy, dusty and weathered tank. I know that some of the areas painted in the previous episode have been completely covered by this dust effect, but it's the price I have to pay for representing this heavy dusty Panzer on the Russian steppe. This technique allows you to get extremely good results if applied properly. I'm pretty happy how just with a couple of paints I can create a wide variety of effects, going from the smoothest dust transitions to some of the crispiest and more interesting dust accumulations. All in all, this is a very extended but simple weathering sketch for my future purposes. In the next videos I will be working in the following weathering techniques, building step by step the weathering process. So I hope you enjoy the video and you find this content useful or at least interesting. So thanks for watching and I see you in the next one.